I will also start with a disclaimer that I'm not a lawyer, so I know eIDAS is a regulation, so there might be some of the questions that we will not be able to address today, but we will present them afterwards. I think it's important to present also a bit what eIDAS means, since eIDAS and CEF has been mentioned before. So before moving to the interesting, more practical presentation on CEF eID and the student domain that my colleague Mario will present, I will just briefly present what is eIDAS for eID, as eIDAS is a regulation that also sets the rules for trust services, but today we're only focusing on eID. Briefly, just recapping a bit of the benefits. The benefits have been, we have seen them throughout the different presentations, but this is just to consolidate a little bit. And briefly, what is the status of the eIDAS eID infrastructure, but I'll go on later. So eIDAS eID, what does it mean? So the eIDAS regulation for eID is actually making mandates the mutual recognitions of electronic identification schemes. What, in other words, it means for citizens like us who is traveling or want to do business abroad. Myself, I'm a Romanian citizen living in Belgium. Would allow me, for example, to pay taxes in Belgium with my Romanian ID. Or register my address online and go to the pharmacy and access some of my medical data. So that is more on the public services side, but it's also about creating businesses and could potentially use the eID for private services. One thing that is very important about the eIDAS regulation in IDs, I mentioned, is what is unique about it, or like what differentiates it from other eID services, is that it's an agreement between the member states and sets a legal framework for the delivery of the eIDAS services. And the important thing is the mutual recognition, and for that to happen, there is what we call the notification process. So in order for, let's say, a Belgian citizen to be able to use Belgian ID abroad, Belgium as a member state has to go through a notification process, which means the selection of the ID schemes, the peer review of the other member states, and an official addition of this ID scheme to the eIDAS infrastructure, after which the member states have the obligation to recognize that. So what does that interested as a student, but also as a citizen, is that this translates that as of next year, on the 29th of September 2018, all online public services require electronic identification assurance corresponding to a level high or substantial or high, must be able to accept the notified ID schemes of other European countries. So that is actually the benefits in a way, or what it is about. So there was regulation with an accompanying implementing act and a set of technical specifications that transpose a bit more in practice of how this is going to be achieved. So again, emphasizing that this is a service delivered by the member states for the member states in the interest of the citizen, but from which other actors like identity providers and service providers can benefit from. And the slide that you see currently is presented the eID ecosystem. So I'm not going to go into the technical details. I think Mario has a slide, maybe a little bit on a technical way of how the eID service is delivered. This is not a technical webinar, so I'm not going to go into details. But basically, every member state has to have a node that allows their identity scheme to be connected to this network, which makes it possible for their own citizens to use the same way as they're always used to, also abroad. We've seen the eIDAS regulation, but now what we also heard CEF Connecting Europe facility, which is like a financial instrument that has several projects. The one that is organizing this event and helps with the implementation is the eID building block. So on one hand, we have the regulation, and on the implementation side, CEF eID building block is there to support the implementation and the rollout of the eIDAS requirements. Among a few things that is notable to mention about the CEF eID building block is that it offers a sample implementation that is for the node required for the member state to be able to connect to the eIDAS infrastructure. The project is also supporting the member states in their work to create and manage the eIDAS compliant set of technical specifications. Again, it's important to know that it's, again, a service of the member states. The product and the technical specifications belongs to the member states. And another one important aspect of the building block and the services that we have is that we act as an uptake accelerator. We have several activities to help the member states increase the uptake of eID, as the event today, for example, and other studies. What is eIDAS, eID? So ultimately, as I think in the previous presentations already mentioned, the idea is that we want to provide a service, members they want to provide a service that for the student, for example, it will be more secure, easy to use, and more cost efficient when traveling abroad to use different online services, which I think Mario will maybe briefly touch upon the next presentation to make it a bit more concrete. The benefits of eIDAS, so whenever I think about it in different presentations, what makes eIDAS eID different as a key feature, or let's say how we label the eIDAS eID service is a secure cross-border authentication. That is defined in the regulation in such a way that is flexible, so it is domain agnostic. It can be used in different domains. I believe we've received the questions as of such. It's also flexible that it does not impose any technology constraints on the member states. So they can provide identity solutions based on mobile, based on cards, whatever the member states choose to implement. There's also an advantage to this service that it has governance in place set up under Connecting Europe facility, but there's also stipulated in the eIDAS regulation, there are cooperation network which is ultimately responsible for the eIDAS eID infrastructure. And lastly, the cost saving of, for example, for citizen to actually go to the cashier and rather than doing something in person, but also for other, let's say, service providers of implementing their own identity system that they can just reuse an existing solution. As you can see in this slide, there's different benefits for all the different actors. We've already mentioned a bit about the citizen, and in this case could be the students. We made a difference between public administration and service providers because we mentioned in the beginning the obligation for public administrations of accepting a notified identity scheme under certain conditions. But there is, it has been since 2014 under CEF, financial support under forms of grants. I think also Rana mentioned it a bit before. Also for identity providers, this is a new area of application. All the calls was also supported them financially to help this become a reality. And of course, for the service providers, they're also included in the CEF calls that we had. It helps them adopt a solution that is secure and potentially increase the user base by accessing users from other member states that they did not have a contact or they wish to do business. So. Just as before going to Mario's presentation, of course, we're talking always about cross-border transactions, and we may wonder how many transactions are lastly, what is the status? This I always invite you to also visit our CEF Digital website for continuous updates, where we have the status of the member states with a big disclaimer that these are statuses based on the information that we receive from the member states, and it's not always up to date. As you can see, the percentage is quite encouraging. I mentioned a notification, which is a crucial point for the eIDAS eID rollout. You have the German pre-notification in February this year and the official notification in September. And we were expecting and still expecting 5 more countries. This is informal information by the end of 2017. Other encouraging achievements, again, please follow us on CEF Digital with other news, where we try to convey as many successful stories about successful implementation of eIDAS eID. You will have the slides after the presentation and access to CEF Digital for more information about success stories. And now I move on to Mario.